What's going on, people? You already know the vibes. It's your boy, Mr. Bell, aka. Can't say your name up on this pod, might not. But anyways, hey, welcome to another episode of Hold Up in Another Thing presented by Mixed Vibes Media. You know what I'm saying? You know what we do over here. But I want to have a conversation about teaching the youth Black history and some states changing the laws. But so I had to get some guests with me. First up, the doctor, Mr. Kamar Douglas. What's going on, bro?
Yo, how's everybody doing? Hope everybody doing all right tonight. We got a powerful conversation we're ready to have this evening.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate you joining. And Miss Bell, I'm saying she'd have done a lot. She'd have done out of the last 4 or 5, she'd have been on 3 of them. So she back for some serious, What's up?
What's going on, everybody? I'm glad to be back on the pod once more and again. Looking forward to this conversation on tonight.
All right, something serious. We're gonna be ratchet talking about Beyonce and Rihanna and stuff. And all right, last but certainly not least, I've been knowing this young lady for a long time. She used to come to my grandma's porch with my little cousin. So I remember her from way back, How you doing, Miss Ross?
Hello. Hi. I am super excited to be here because it's a topic that I hold dear to my heart. I think it's something that needs to be said and mentioned, and especially in today's age with a lot of the state laws and everything that's revolving around what not to have in the classroom. So thank you for inviting me to this podcast or discussion.
Thank you for joining. But we're gonna start right there. We're gonna start with you, Ms. Ross. Why is it so important to teach the youth about Black history and Black education?
I'm gonna say it's very important to educate students on the plight of Black people in America because we help build this country. And for us to be excluded from textbooks says a lot about the oppressor and the colonialism that has happened in this country. And as a Black person, I identify as Black. Black History Month is kind of the only time in the school system where it's recognized. If it is recognized, it shouldn't just be 1 month, but it should be something incorporated into the curriculum and the textbook throughout the year. So to limit Black people who helped start this country, who helped build this country, who endured a lot in need reparations, that's a whole nother topic, to not have us mentioned in the actual history, but be a separate section from the history of this country that says a lot about how we are living and what we are facing.
Okay. What about you, Doctor?
It's definitely highly important. This is kind of step off of what Ms. Ross was stating. Of course, the knowledge that we have of the history of the Black man and the Black woman, the history of the Black man and woman in America is one thing, but we also need to be able to teach our kids that prior to the encroachment of the white man around the world, us as Black people were the ones that actually controlled and spread knowledge throughout the entire world, which is why if you go into various places throughout Europe, still places all around the world, you will see imagery of Black people. And the imagery that you see of Black people is not just about them living, it is about them being considered to be the most religious people. For instance, when the man was asked to paint a picture of white Jesus, his response was, "How can I do that? There are no images of white people that are religious." So all of that even too is important to be able to understand. Also too, if you look at like the history of us here in America, they do not want to teach the youth. The civil rights movement, of course, was pushed through by the youth. So if you teach them that will incite them to be able to fight for the rights that they know that they deserve to have. So in doing so, by pulling this information out of the schools, it does not allow individuals to know how much power they have if they truly unite. I know it's sad. I have my doctorate, but I didn't realize how young Rosa Parks was when she's still on the bus until I got to graduate school. Because inside the school, of course, they show you this picture of this old Black woman. So as a kid, I always pictured her that way when she did it. They didn't show the image of what she looked like when she did it. They showed the image of what she looked like at that current time. So it's definitely important to be able to deliver the truth of the actual history of the world and the history of us as Black people and all of the gloriness that we have brought to this world.
All right, Mrs. Bell, why is it important?
I mean, I feel like it's important because much like what everyone else has said, I mean, we literally have built this country and we built a lot of other parts of the world as well. And I think that it's an effort to, I think that it's important to people. You kind of keep people in an ignorant space when you don't allow them to know the history. And that's of all races and backgrounds, right? They need to know the history. First of all, it helps cultivate a well-rounded individual no matter what race they are, right? To understand culturally. And I think they also want to keep a stereotypical thought process about African Americans or about Black people. And so when you really learn the history and you learn all the things that we've done, it shatters all of those stereotypical things that they hear or that get passed down from generation to generation. And I think, that's why it's important, because it tears down the lies. It tears down the stories that people have been telling about us all these years, and the stereotypes that they create around who we are culturally. I think it would actually expand people's horizons. So I feel like it's important because it tears down the lies, first and foremost, that people have been saying about us as a people in general.
I'm gonna stick with you. What ways should it be taught more? Do you think it should be a mandated in grade level, throughout the years, so that it's not, like Ms. Ross said, that it's not just in Black History Month when it's being taught?
Oh yeah, I think it should be all the time. I think it should be just like anything else you teach. You teach history pretty much 3 years of middle school, all 4 years of high school pretty much is a required course. So why would you negate that part of history? History is history. So now, I mean, there's another part of that, right? I think that you should not be just putting portions of the history into the book. You should be putting all of the history into the books, right? Because they typically only want to teach you about slavery, but they don't want to teach you about the other things, right? So I think that it should be incorporated all year long. I think it should be a part of the core curriculum. But much like anything else, like any other culture, you should really, any culture, we learn about Indians, we learn about the colonies, you learn about all that stuff, and then you learn about slaves, but you don't really want to tell the other parts of that. And I think that that's unfortunate. So it needs to be a regular, it shouldn't just be in Black History Month. It should be every year that you teach in history and you making it a mandate that a student learns about history. That's a part of the history.
I agree with that. And I would say that it starts with the publishing companies of these textbooks. There's a lot of money, a lot of lobbyists that are going to school districts and advocating for their textbook curriculum to be implemented. And until those individuals and those companies understand the entire inclusiveness that is needed for all the proper representations of all cultures in the country, it doesn't really matter. You can say teach Black history, but if we are still relying on teachers to come up with a lesson, teachers that may not know anything except Harriet Tubman, we're not going to go anywhere. We need to get the Black history of this country into the McGraw-Hill, the Prentice Hall, all of those top leading lobbyist publishing companies. So until that happens, then, I mean, I really don't see anything changing because, like I said, as a Black woman, as a Black teacher, during Black History Month, I was the only one doing Black history lessons. And when I asked other teachers about it, they was like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm not Black. Like, it should have been in the book. But how much can we rely on teachers who are not of color to be independent and just have a growth mindset and be ready to do the research and do the work on their own? They're overwhelmed right now with everything going on in this country. They don't have time to go on Google and figure out what should I do for Black History Month. It should already be available to them. The curriculum should be provided. And like I said, when we look at textbooks and buying curriculum for districts, we need to look at who we are buying from and what they are representing.
But hold on, before you go, Dr. Douglas, let me ask you this, Ms. Ross. How do we as the people get into your McGraw-Hills to get it to their attention of you need to include this into the curriculum, into the textbooks?
That is That's pretty hard.
Okay.
It starts with advocating, showing up to board meetings, telling the school board, hey, I've done my research. They do not support all of our students in the district. We can do some small changes there, but we really have to change who the people are at the top of the company. Because again, if we look at who are the CEOs, who the presidents are of these publishing companies, they don't look like the people that we are expecting them to write about. They're old white men, to be honest with you. The same people that we look at in the government. They're not going to tell our history. They don't care about our history. It's not important to them. We are the minority. So until we change the leadership in those companies, it will be very hard, but we still need to advocate and pressure them to make those changes on their own. And, like not buying books from them, I don't know, making a TikTok post or something to make them woke, I guess.
Woke being the key word. Being the key word. Mr. Doctor. Mr. Doctor.
Yeah, and the crazy part about it is both of the lovely ladies actually state, like inside of JCPS, there is a plethora, and there is like an actual library, and there's resources for individuals, teachers to access, but it's about the ability for the teachers to actually access it as a teacher. And she stated, as Ms. Ross stated, they call themselves educators, but then they choose not to educate their own self, to educate the children they're supposed to be educated. You have these access to these resources that exist, but it's the lack of checking and the lack of will for the teachers their own self to actually get the hold of the material and wrap their mind around the material. But the other part about that also too is when they read the material their own self in detail, then what that does is it breaks down their whole life, their whole history, the knowledge that is passed on to them. Once they begin to read this other things that are available, then they will see everything they have been taught by the school system, taught by their parents, taught by their loved ones, that it's completely false. And it's all just made up in such a way to frame us in the position that we are in as Black people inside of America. So part of that is like destructing the internal white supremacist mindset that these individuals have. You can have the most liberal person, the most liberal white person, and this person will still act as if they are completely conservative or, almost like a Nazi almost. I know there was a book that was done, I believe it's called The Wrongs of the Right and the Left, where there was a white individual that implanted himself in these far left liberal groups, and he planted himself in these far right neo-Nazi groups. And he came to the conclusion that both of the groups operated the same way. Both of the groups were making their minds up about Black people, but they're actually communicating to them. So the inability to communicate with each other, to figure it out, is a big portion of why teachers don't even feel comfortable with explaining the stuff that's already there in front of them. They don't know how to. And as I stated earlier, once they do, then what that does is it basically breaks up their whole stature in life and how they see everything, because they will understand the things that they are operating under is completely false. Completely false. And it does need to be taught, but as far as the ability for it to be taught, that's the part. I know I myself have done several different teacher professional development trainings on racism and Louisville just alone. And the small part of the things that I had informed them about, none of them had any idea about. All of them were basically just stunned with the information I was giving them as they were there at the professional development, listening to me talking about racism and it's just new. So there's a lot of eye-opening that needs to go on. And a lot of times, too, you have these teachers that act in such a way that they have to sit through a professional development and all that. They kind of just space out and don't even pay attention. They're just doing it because they got to do it. And one of the things I would tell them close to the end of my session, I would say, all of you all in here got a smartphone that has to be updated 4 to 5 times in a year. Why are you still teaching the same way you taught 5, 10 years ago? Why have you not updated the way in which you are teaching? But you have a device in your pocket that gets manual updates periodically. You need to update your strategies. If the way in which you are engaging and delivering your message is not reflective of the student population, then you are doing yourself in them kids a disfavor.
But let me ask you this though. Dr. Douglas, we talked about the teaching in the school. Is it also important to teach at home? I know what you do, but why do you think there's a disconnect in the African American community about teaching our own history? Do you think it's because we don't know
That's definitely what it is. There's a lack of a lot of individuals that are even trying to understand their own history. But I always look at it too, though. Like for instance, if you have students in JCPS and their teachers, their parents also within JCPS, it's very rare that you have a Black student that comes out of JCPS that does not have some racist traumatic experience or something that has happened to them inside of the school. So that kind of causes them their own self to deter from education once they graduate. But at the same time, they should also understand that them experiences that you had or them experiences that you witnessed is more than likely that your child is going to experience it, and your child is not going to know what to deal with it because you are not engaging with it. It's very important to be able to teach your kids about your history while they're at home, especially because the message that they're going to be getting at school is not going to be correct. But I know me and my own self, and then my kids, while they are in school, when those falsities get brought up, they question the teacher, which is what they're supposed to do. But they can only do that because of information I'm able to give them outside of school.
Mr. Russell, how, I don't want to say how can we improve, because it's easy to ask the question of how we can improve. But do you think it's as simple as making a TikTok to make Black parents more interested in teaching Black history?
Because
that's what we pay attention to, apparently.
Yeah. Social media has a big influence on what our students, what our youth do in school. But if the parents don't have the knowledge to support it at home, then it won't get supported. We're still having issues with parents reading with their child at home. So we can't really ask or expect them to teach them the history of their culture, even though for some families they do that. They have those times or those moments where they're teaching their child, hey, our family came from here, we are descendants of these people. But for the Black people in America, for a large population of us, we don't really know our identity or our roots in Africa. And it's kind of like we have been relying heavily on the public school system, and we know how effective that is. We have relied on them to educate our kids. I think back when we had the Black Panther movement, that was a large positive thing for the Black community, because they did go around in communities and teach people what their history was. But I don't really see that nowadays. It's kind of like, hey, your teachers, that's their job to teach you. I'm focused on paying the bills. I'm focused on, living or surviving. A lot of our kids are just doing that. Their families are surviving. They don't have time to go and buy books or review what they did in school. And that's hurting our students. That's hurting our population, because then we're relying on the teachers, and these teachers who don't know the students that they're teaching. They can't relate to them. They aren't from those communities that their students come from. They go to the PD, they check off the list. I did my diversity training, but did you really do the training? Or are you just doing it to be compliant? And what I've seen is mostly they are doing it to be compliant. So it's I don't know a quick fix. I don't really know an answer, except we have to be proactive with things that we do in the community and services we do in the community to teach our students what they need to be taught, because they're not getting it from other places. And like I said, parents have a lot on their plate. So I don't know.
Isn't that part of being a parent, though? It's taking everything that comes
I would definitely say that. But then we have parents who aren't checking their child's grade until the end of the school year. How do you go a whole year? You don't know how your child's doing in school. So if they don't know how their child's doing in school, I can't really, assume that they've been teaching their child their history.
I understand. You talked, Ms. Ross talked about reading. Actually, I know you do a event every year about reading. What impassions you to do this event?
What empowered me to do it is that I felt like the youth did not know who they were. And I felt like the world, if you will, is telling them everything that they are, or when it really should be coming from at home, right? It starts at home. I find my identity because my parents poured into me, right? And so I felt like it was a need that you need to see a book and you need to see an author and you need to see an illustrator that looks like you. You need to see that so that you understand that these kids are so creative. They have some wonderful minds, but when the world or in some cases the school systems, the governmental system, and any other system you could probably name, infiltrates them, then now the world is telling them who they are and not telling them who, it's not necessarily always coming from the parents. They're getting a lot of their information from TikTok. I don't know how many, I would say young adults even, they get all their information from TikTok. And I'm like, no, like, when you gonna pick up a book? When you gonna find a newspaper? Read an article or something, Like, why are you relying on TikTok to give you all your information? Nothing against TikTok, right? I enjoy it too, right? And I engage in it. But to me, it was important that young people, and I'm talking about elementary school kids, know who they are. And they can see somebody that's doing it. It might not be, that they're going to be a professional athlete, but you got writers, you got illustrators, you got those students that are really, really creative. And sometimes parents just don't know the resources or the way to tap into it. And I was in a position, fortunately, that I knew people in these spaces. I know people that write children's books. I know people who publish books. I know there's people who self-publish their own kids' books. So I had to it got to a point where it was like, no, if I know these people, how do I get these folks to talk to other individuals just to get their kids engaged in something other than what they're engaged in every day on social media or whatever? How do I let them know that this is attainable? That your child can be 7 years old and have a book with their name on it? Because kids are doing it. And they're African American too. Like they're minorities. So like, how do you push that? And I'm like, I felt like there was an opportunity to do an event that doesn't require anything but your time. Yeah, if you want to purchase a book, you can purchase a book from an author, which happens to be a minority author, right? So it helps them, but it also gets a book in the child's hand so they can read, so they can see pictures that look like them. Because when I was growing up, that was few and far between. The only books I really read that looked like me was about history. It was about the Rosa Parks. It was about James Earl Jones. It was about like major African American figures. But it wasn't really the children's book that shows me that they're, playing with the neighbors and how to share. Those weren't the books that I had as a kid. But there are a lot of authors out there. So it was also like, how do we create this exposure to parents and to students that this world exists? How do you get the two to mesh? How do you get them two to be brought together? So there was a passion for me because I knew that I didn't necessarily see that as a kid. Yeah, I did have, thank you, Lord, I had parents that instilled history into me and how to navigate in a world that is trying to tell me who I am as a young African-American female. But I had parents that did that. But it's also the imagery of what your child is seeing every day. If all they see is guns and cartoons and all this stuff, but none of them look like you and me, that's shaping their world. That's shaping everything that they see. And sometimes, unfortunately, TV and social media is what's raising kids. I mean,
that's the truth.
So, right.
The latest YouTube sensation.
You bring, what I'm saying? That, I mean, not to be giving a plug, but why do you think Gracie's Corner is such a hit? It's an educational YouTube channel, basically, for for babies and young kids. But it shows a young girl, African-American girl, teaching ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s. It's positive, and it has a little kick to it, got a little beat to it, which brings out our culture a little bit. But you don't see that on Disney. You're not seeing that on your normal cartoon channels. You got to go to YouTube to find that. But because it started to grow esteem in the African-American community, that's why people use that. And they start boycotting these other cartoons that don't mean their children no good. When you really get down to some of the meanings behind some of these cartoons as well. I know I kind of got off on a tailspin, but it's just saying that there's a space where there are Black creators, educators in their own right for what they do, that if we show our kids that, then they're not just exposed to the stuff that the governmental system, the school system, the teacher, the principal, the bus driver, the hall patrol, whoever else that they, the coaches on a team, they're not just exposed to them. They're actually exposed to people who are doing something, or somebody that's a teenager that wrote a book. You going to school with somebody, or you getting in contact with somebody that's your same age, your peer, that's doing something that you've never done before, so that you know that it can be done. I'm seeing grandparents writing school age books with their grandchildren. It was like, wait a minute, this is out here happening. Like, we need to bring the worlds together. The hardest thing that has been, though, is really getting parents and students, kids, to be involved in something like that. That's been the hardest challenge, but it exists. It's there. And these folks are willing. They want to give. Yeah, they're authors, and yes, they get make money off of books, but it's something that does something for their heart and their soul when they can get a book into a kid's hands that look like them.
That's what they're doing it for.
You don't have to wait till you're an adult to be a writer and a producer and leave a legacy in the world. You don't have to wait. There's an opportunity right now, and there's people looking for these kids. And then they got these kids that are so just magnificent with their minds, can write and illustrate. They don't even realize that that's a whole career that they could have now. Yeah, I want them to have their youth, but they could be creating legacy now. And it's so easy and attainable. When I figured out how easy it actually was, I was like, hey, but they don't know that these resources are available to them. You know what I mean? So I do have a passion for it. I know I went on a rant, but man, when I seen it, there was an opportunity, and because books, man, they're gonna be books. Some of these books we reading has been 100-some years old. The same history they were teaching our parents.
This is true.
You know what I'm saying? So if a child can get a book out there, or a young adult can get a book out there, how long is that book going to be around? That it ends up in the right hands of somebody. Make a TikTok about it. They do be making TikTok. These authors be out here making TikToks though. But I'm just saying.
You gotta promote the best way you can.
That's all I'm saying. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Agree. And what I am going to add to that is that I feel the Black community needs to value education more. I feel like we have devalued education. And for example, we went from, Little Rock High School, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Central High School, to integrating classrooms and fighting for our students to be in mixed classrooms, to now not even making them get up to go to school. And that's something that I struggle with, because I keep telling kids to get out of poverty, to be successful, you need an education. You need to be educated so no one gets over on you, because society will get over on those who they feel don't really know what's best for them. And the number of, families and students who don't attend school, they drop out of school. I'm like, coming from your grandparents fighting to get into school, and now you just choose not to go at all. We do need to go back to and just reminding people, especially Black people, that you won't escape your situation until you have the education to do it. It's just a cycle of continuing poverty, because they don't have the skills or the knowledge to upgrade their quality of life.
Let me add something real quick too. It's also important to understand that the way in which we engage education, and the way in which that our students are taught in these public schools, it reflects the agenda that America wants. America is an extremely capitalist society. For capitalism to be able to continue to breathe, you have to consistently produce individuals that will hold those jobs at the bottom, that will keep on turning this capitalist wheel. So the way in which that they teach us is reflective of that, because they are producing generations and generations of individuals that are undereducated, that will be stuck in those low-wage jobs. It's done on purpose. If you look at the creation of the American public school system, it was created around the same time that the public school system was created in England. What England did was England made two separate schools. They had a school that the upper echelons would go to that allowed them to go to college. And then they had another school the individuals would go to where their education will not even make them eligible to go to college. But here in America, they devised a way to keep the individuals together, but still also figure out a way to separate them as they graduate. You know, it's the same intentions that they had in England, but it just plays out differently over here. You know, the way in which that they track our kids through school. If you have a teacher that writes down so many notes about your behavior, writes down so many notes about how they feel that you are able to be educated, that you will get tracked for those low-rank classes for every school you continue to go to. You know, and all of that stuff that those teachers do in that instance is very subjective. It's based upon how they feel about the behavior of the student, not really based upon guidelines and regulations. It's based upon their own intentions and their own opinions. You know, so we have to understand that the connection between education is also the connection that which continues to help America to be the sort of capitalistic as it is.
I agree with that. You know, if everybody had a college degree, you know, we won't have people working low-level jobs. And what I'm going to say hypothetically is we used to be notifying families when kids miss 5 days of school. Where's your child? You better get them here. We're going to take you to court. Now it's like 30 plus days before you notify families. And me, that's more than a whole month. We're not including weekends. Why is it okay that we're not keeping to the same standards we had 5 years ago? What message are we sending to families? Your child doesn't have to go to school. You know, I understand COVID was a thing. I understand the pandemic was a thing, but why are we still allowing kids to be truant? And we know what those kids look like that are truant. They're Black and brown kids, the same kids that need the most assistance, the same kids that need the most resources, the same kids that are being traumatized, living through trauma, maybe from a single parent household. Maybe there was a shooting down the street. Maybe they're struggling to keep the lights on. Those are the kids that are at home. Why are we allowing them to not be educated? And for society to think that it's okay for them to not go to school, it really hurts me. And I try to do the best that I can, but it's the message of, you know, truancy. Why are we allowing kids to stay at home when they should be in school learning? And it goes back to what you said. It's because we need those individuals to keep those low paying jobs. Everybody can be at the top. We still need people at the bottom.
Still need people flipping burgers at McDonald's. But so kids can miss 30 days of school before it's a phone call. That's
30 plus. I think I said 30 plus.
Oh, 30 plus. Well, 30, that's still
hypothetically, don't nobody come for me. Hypothetically.
Okay, hypothetically, you make sure you put that in there. Like, you make sure you put hypothetical in a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, but the thing about that though, like it's just like the schools just allow them to fail. You can't miss that many days and expect to have passing grades. I expect even to learn something. You can't just walk in and out of the classroom. It's a continuous lesson that's taught on a daily basis or a bi-daily basis. You got the block schedule going on. Like you have to be there to understand what's coming next.
I don't know. That just was kind of blowing to me. It's like, I don't know what school district that is, but why are we, whatever school district that is, hypothetically, that is allowing these kids, basically they're allowing the kids to fail. We don't care about these kids. I don't know. That just was a little shock to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like, in essence, what Ms. Ross has said is, we've lessened the grip, because when we were in school, that wasn't gonna fly. Well, our parents probably gonna knock us upside the head on one end of it.
You know, my grandma.
It sounds like the school systems across the country, I'm gonna say, allegedly.
Yeah. It's a nationwide issue. You know, I was sick and I had to go to school. Like, you couldn't stay here. I had to go out of the house. But right now, you know, they at home on TikTok making videos, sending it to their classmates that are in school. And there's no repercussion for it. And the parents are at work, or they're not aware, but for the most part, the parents are aware. You know, they get the little robo phone calls, your child wasn't in school today, but it isn't prompting any action on their part. And my thing is, if they aren't coming to school, there's two things that's going to happen. We know they aren't getting the material. They aren't learning what they need to learn. One thing, they're just going to be passed on. That's the issue we have with kids in high school who can't read. Or two, they're going to be retained, and then they're going to feel like a failure and drop out. So we have kids graduating who don't have the necessary skills to be successful. Then we have a group of kids who just dropped out because, they aged out, or they feel like, hey, my friends went to the next grade and I didn't, so I'm just going to not go back at all. And all of that could have been avoided if we were proactive with the truancy and the kid not showing up to school.
All right. Before we get out of here, it's a law in Florida. They call it the Woke Act. And Dr. Douglas actually told me about this over a year ago. I wanted to get y'all quick thoughts about that act and that law. Mr. Douglas, since you told me about it a year ago.
Well, it's just an extent to basically to mandate white supremacist behavior inside of the school. To frame that law in such a way where you are stating that when you learn knowledge about things beyond what the governor learns, that it is indoctrination. But in fact, what he is doing is indoctrinating the students of Florida and stitch white supremacy. How can you justify taking away portions of history written by Black people from the Black perspective and say that if people learn that, it's indoctrinating them? No, it's not indoctrinating them. To keep people blinded by the true reality of what's happening is indoctrinating them. It's completely opposite from what he's claiming it to be. But because that messaging inside of those books attacks white fragility, he does not want to have to deal with it. He feels as if people have the truth, then they will hate themselves as white people. Now, how crazy is that? He's admitting that he knows the history of what they have done to us is so bad that if a child reads it, they're going to pick themselves. That tells you right there that it's a lot of reasons to have it, and it shows you exactly who he is in the people that support him. For you to assume that if you hear the real history of what has happened, that person will hate their white skin, and that means it's been some fucked up shit y'all have been doing forever. And just because you don't teach it doesn't hide it. But what that does is when individuals learn that at a later date, or if they hear that at a later date, their first statement is going to be, well, that has to be false. I wasn't taught that in school. Why have I never heard about that before? You must have been getting your information from somewhere else. How can you claim that to be true? It wasn't inside of my history class, inside of my social studies. Matter of fact, we didn't have them books in our school. So if that continues to go on, that's going to be the messaging that's actually going to be teaching to those students inside of that state. As a matter of fact, they have the bill proposed as well for Kentucky. So it's going to be very interesting to see what actually goes on with that bill. I know when they were trying to mess up the teachers' pensions and so forth, like teachers from around the state mounted together and they came to the state house to fight for their pensions. But my fear is that when they do that there's already so many teachers that exist inside of our public education system that will probably love that because they might hate teaching it or they have no idea to teach that kind of stuff.
All right. Hypothetically, Ms. Ross, or just I don't want to say play devil's advocate, but when you teach in, let's say, slavery in school, how, I guess their point is, they're not to make Caucasians feel away, right? Is that a solid argument for it not to be taught?
No, that's not a solid argument, but it's an easy argument to do when you limit in a regular textbook Black history to a paragraph. When I was in high school, we did American history, we did world history, but Black history was an elective that may have been canceled. The teacher may have had to teach something else if we didn't have enough people sign up for that class. So to me, it's kind of like, what difference is it making when that history isn't already included in the regular textbook? So until we include fully Black history into the regular textbook that everyone else is learning or being educated on, then I really don't know what the problem is. And the other thing I would say is that's why it's very important that families teach their child their history, because we don't hear all of this pushback when we're talking about the Holocaust. Everybody know Anne Frank's diary. Everybody. And it did not happen in America. She was not from America, But when we talk about Jim Crow laws, when we talk about segregation, when we talk about the Little Rock Nine, everybody is not aware of that. Why is that? And it happened here in the country that they are in. So again, until we address the curriculum of these textbooks, we won't really address the issue, and we'll continue to have the issues that we have in society. But it's easy to say, let's not include it or whatever, because it's not really included right now.
Ms. Bell, what is your thoughts on the woke act? Ashley.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I think it's shameful, if I'm really being honest, right? So granted, I can say I learned a lot of history from my parents, and then also as in school. So y'all been teaching these kids that's in my age group and above this history all this time. What's the difference now? I mean, I'm being for real. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden now, because now don't get me wrong, a lot of events have transpired in the last 10 years, right? That has caused race to become out loud, you know what I mean, in a way that it probably hasn't in a long time. Let me say it that way. It's always been there for us.
It's the Black Lives Matter. They
Right.
hate Black Lives Matter.
Always been there for us.
They came up with the Black Lives Matter. It really hurt the Black community because it made people more racist and more outspoken than what they already were. And Black Lives Matter isn't that at all. It's just saying that my life matters. My history matters. Put it in the book. But they view it as a target on their own history and their own pride. So they have used that as a weapon to dismantle the Black community even further than they already have.
Right. And so in essence, for me, you just what they've always done, put a law in place to cover up and hide stuff and be deceitful. Well, but the other part of that is that even when some of them find out their history, they might just see a little bit of that lineage that creeped on over to some of us. And they just don't even know it. And so my thought is that even though you're still trying to hide and deceive true facts, it still exists. It still can be found. And if you really want to talk about it now, when you get to a certain, if you really look at this next couple of generations, they don't care about none of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like they're even more, they embrace some things that we probably didn't in our own generation, right? They're more embracing. So here it is, they're trying to put a law in place that, to be honest, probably over the next 25 to 40 years, it's probably going to be overturned anyway. Now, that doesn't necessarily solve our problem for today. I recognize that. Right. But what I am saying is that this next set of kids, now, like for real, I was just at a school today myself, you know, trying to help them get some jobs if they don't want to go to college. And they have a completely different view than where we are right now, and a completely different view of those that are older than us that are in these governmental spots that are making these decisions. And see, I thought we were the age of information. Now, this next group is the age of information.
It's all right there for them.
The information that they get is going to be accurate, granted, with some of the social media aspects. But they want more than we wanted. And so to even think, you know, I am hopeful, but to even think that they think a law like this is going to withstand long, it ain't. Not with this next generation that's coming up. When you spend, I know that there are some that, you know, don't really do the school thing, but there are a set of kids now out here that are in school, that are being educated, that are doing their research, that are challenging teachers in the classroom. And so those are probably going to be the next legislators. But all it is an effort to be deceitful. But anybody that wants the truth, and I think this next generation, they do. They're not going to be just shysted in any kind of way. They're going to go and they're going to challenge us and challenge, you know, even our generation in a way that we've never been challenged before. They're already doing it. Mm-hmm. They're going into the workforce with a different mindset. Yeah, people talk about them being entitled, but aside from the negativity they talking about, these kids starting to figure out some things. That's why they was in the street. If you really look at it, there was some young folks out there that was actually marching in the street when Black Lives Matter came around. They parents looking at them like, you crazy, you stay at the house. Them kids is out there. So I don't agree with it at all. And I do believe it's the same tactic that has been used over the years, over and over again. But just like HBCUs, and when we were always being set back, yet we still keep coming above. Yet we still making accomplishments. I'm not saying that we still don't have a ways to go in areas that we've even discussed tonight from a community standpoint. But yet we still find ways to get ahead. So I feel like every time you come up with something like this, you just making it worse on yourself. Because we find ways to get around everything that's been thrown our way. In a positive way, I'm saying. I'm not, we've overcome challenges over the years. Our history shows it. So here, this is just another thing, threw our way, and we're going to overcome that too. History shows it. Because you wouldn't keep doing what you're doing if it hadn't, right? You wouldn't have to change anything if the bar don't keep moving, because we keep moving. We keep moving forward. I don't like it, but I've also known my history well enough to know that every time something has come against us culturally, we found ways to overcome it. They ain't figured that out yet, I guess, but culturally, as a people, we have. Yeah, we have some things we need to fix, but that's what culture don't have some things they need to fix, though. Mm-hmm. We ain't having that conversation tonight, but
some powerful discussion. It's important, the conversation that we had. I want to thank each and every single one of y'all for, taking the time out of y'all schedules to do this. Dr. Douglas, thank you, my brother. Miss Ross, I appreciate you. Hopefully, you come back again. You could say bye. You can unmute yourself to say bye.
Thank you for having me, though, man. It's always a blessing to be on. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you for having this discussion, this topic. It just reinforces the need for our community to be aware of what our weaknesses is and also what our strengths are. We are a very resilient group of people. And like Ms. Bell said, it doesn't really matter what laws they put into place. We know the people that are in the government right now. We know what they look like. But with the new generation, I don't even know what they call them yet. One of my kids actually asked me, he was like, what generation are you? I was just like, I don't know, XYZ, one of them. But with the new group that we have now and the influence social media has had on them, they are very outspoken with no filter, and they'll protest in a heartbeat. So I think that's maybe why they are doing so many laws and implementing so many things right now. It's because they know their time is coming to an end. But yeah, thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. With the old and with the new. Miss Bell, thank you for coming back. Three of the last 4 pods that are done, you have been a part of.
No, I always appreciate the invites. I appreciate the different conversations. And of course, I appreciate our culture as a whole. So I like having these discussions. I think they're very important. So I appreciate you and the content that we're able to discuss. So
always, I'm here to try to expand, try to do a little bit of everything on this platform that I get. Miss Bell, I will see you in a couple of weeks so we can talk about our R&B groups. Because, I know you about to say something crazy.
I'm gonna leave you alone tonight. This was a good conversation.
I know,
but tonight to talk trash about R&B groups. Hey, we sticking to the main topic tonight. Chill.
It's called a tease. Hey, it's called a tease. You know what I'm saying? Let them know that what's coming. It's just a little tease. That's all. You know what I'm saying? But thank y'all, and thank y'all for listening. You already know the vibes. It's your boy, Mr. Bell. Thank you to listening. Hold Up in Another Thing presented by Mixed Vibes Media. And I'll catch y'all next week.